Welcome to the Canadian Centre for Men and Families. My name is Hayden. I'm the co-chair of the Toronto branch of CAFE, so I put on events like these ones. Tonight, we are having Karen. There's two reasons we're here. One, Karen, obviously, and two, because Ryerson students. The actual reason we're in this location is because we're unable to book a room at Ryerson. As many of you know, we have a men's issues awareness group on campus, unofficially. They have not been ratified by the student union, so there's that issue. If we were ratified by Ryerson, we'd be able to host events like this on campus. We'd have a suite of tools and equipment to be able to do that. So that's unfortunately why we're packed into this room. As many of you may or may not have heard, the Men's Issues Awareness Group recently lost their court case against the Ryerson Student Union. They are still fighting it. There's still a chance for them, and we may have a chance in the future with the new Ryerson Student Union, because they just currently re-elected some new individuals. Karen, I'm going to introduce Karen. There's not much I can say that can really do justice to this person. So, Karen, would you please?
All right, thank you. Thank you for not going on and on and on about how wonderful I am, because I know it. And I always blush when people talk nice about me, so I much prefer when people have nasty things to say. Okay, so tonight's topic is the burden of being male. And so I want you all to imagine being a boy in middle school, maybe 13 years old. And one day you and all the other boys in school get pulled into the gymnasium for an assembly. And up at the front of the gym, there's a man from a charity called White Ribbon. And he's there to tell you how and why men abuse women. And the how is through physical, sexual, and psychological violence, and the why is because patriarchy. It's normative within our culture. It's just what men do. And in cultures like ours, patriarchies, men are elevated and women are subordinated. And society, this man says, doesn't really see anything wrong with men abusing their wives. Not at all. And he's here to tell you. He's here to tell you the incredibly rare message that it's never okay to hit a woman. Now, at the end of the presentation, he asks all the boys to stand up and put their left hand on their heart and their right hand up in the air and take a pledge to not only never, ever abuse a woman or a girl in their lives, but to intervene when they see another man doing that. These boys are supposed to pledge to stand up and intervene when a woman or a girl is being abused by a man or a boy. Of course, by this time, you've turned 13, and you've already been bombarded with messages about how it's never okay to hit a girl or a woman. You've heard it from your parents, you've heard it from your teachers, you've seen it in TV shows and movies and in the commercials in between. You've seen it on billboards and on posters. You've seen it at the bus stop and at the mall. You may have even heard it from those girls who hit you and then said, "You can't hit me back, I'm a girl." Now, what would you think of this exercise in the gymnasium? Why are they telling you this again? Why would they think it's important enough to pull you out of class and tell you something you already know? Do they think you're dumb? Or is it that they think you're just so bad that despite the fact that you've heard this a million times, the message just isn't going to get through to you? That you still think that it's okay to hit a girl. Imagine thinking of all those posters and t-shirts and everything else celebrating girl power. Thinking about all the times you've heard girls being told they can do or be anything boys are and can and will. thinking about Beyonce's hit song, Who Run the World, Girls. Thinking about that girl in your class who wears the boys are stupid, throw rocks at them, matching scarf, hat, and mitten set in the winter. How confusing would that be? What exactly are you expected to be here? If boys and girls are equal, well, if girls can do anything boys can do, why can't they stand up for themselves? Why do they need you? And why do only boys need to be constantly reminded not to hit? So, what's so bad about boys that they need to be singled out like this? To be reminded how not to be bad? What's so special about girls that hitting them is somehow a worse crime than hitting a boy? Maybe if you were very precocious and analytical, you'd wonder why, in a world where girls run things, and where women can be and do anything a man can, why would women and girls even need your protection? And you might even wonder why no one seems interested in protecting you. We do this to boys in North America, in middle schools, and in Australia, and in the UK. A few years ago, I attended a Walk a Mile in Her Shoes event in Edmonton. I don't usually do stuff like that, like the on-the-street stuff. It's not my thing. But Men's Rights Edmonton's founder, Nick Redding, talked me into it. And we kept a pretty low key. We stood off to the side and just handed out literature on gender symmetry and domestic violence to people who approached us. The only thing that made us stand out was Nick Redding's famous or infamous Men's Rights Edmonton sandwich board, and which he actually assaulted me with on our walk down to Sir Winston Churchill Square. The wind took it and almost took my head off. So anyway, we noticed a bunch of young men in football uniforms and high heels standing there watching the speeches on the stage before the walk began. And one of our compatriots, who was not in a sandwich board, went and he was there incognito, went and talked to these boys, and they told him that they were essentially forced to be there. They had the option of not being there. There were uniforms from about 4 different high schools. They had the option not to be there if they were okay with being benched for 2 weeks. Yeah. So it was a forced participation thing. And while they were listening to the speeches, we handed them some literature and said, just give it a read later, give it a look later. And they quietly listened to the speeches, and then they dutifully walked their wobbly, teetering mile in high heels around Sir Winston Churchill Square, along with all the other men who were there to promote the radical and never-before-conceived notion that hitting women is wrong. So I'm just here to ask, what the hell are we doing to our boys and to our men? Aren't we demanding that they embrace 2 completely different paradigms? Contradictory paradigms. In one, girls and women are their equals, every bit as tough, capable, resilient, self-reliant, and powerful as any boy or man. And in the other, girls and women are so vulnerable and fragile that they need to be treated with special gentleness and consideration, extra protection and respect. And they are so incapable that they need boys and men to rescue them from anything that might endanger or upset them. This is really what we're asking boys and men to do when we demand that they take collective responsibility, even as middle schoolers, for violence against women and girls. Collective responsibility. Collective blame. And we're asking them to embrace that paradigm, that even though women are equal, men still need to do for them. You can see this reflected in campaigns against sexual violence as well. Current posters abound on consent and consent issues, particularly around alcohol. One that was particularly egregious, circulated at Coastal Carolina University in the U.S. several years ago, read as follows, and I'm going to read it out. Jake was drunk. Josie was drunk. Jake and Josie hooked up. Josie could not consent. The next day, Jake was charged with rape. A woman who is intoxicated cannot give her legal consent for sex, so proceeding under these circumstances is a crime. It only takes a single day to ruin your life. Think about it. Be responsible. Now, that's interesting, isn't it? While many universities are taking a more gender-neutral approach these days, at least in terms of their promotional materials about sexual consent, in practice, it's still the same old thing. It's still on the man to take responsibility both for his own behavior and for the decision of the woman, especially if a sexual encounter ends up in the weeds. The letter of the law on college campuses is that neither men nor women can consent if they are that intoxicated. But in practice, the spirit of the law is that men are doubly responsible, that the man is the one who is in charge of the entire endeavor, and the woman is, I guess, under his guardianship. We see feminist initiatives that call on men to stand up for women and girls whenever they see any kind of violence or sexism against them. He for She, I'm sure some of you have heard of it, a much publicized UN women campaign spearheaded by celebrity Emma Watson, initially asked women to pledge a vow to stand up whenever they saw violence or sexism against a woman or a girl. After a few months of pushback on social media, they changed the message to be more gender neutral, but it's still targeting men, and that name still gives the same message. He for she. He for she. Not all for all. He for she.